All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Practitioner Spotlight. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Nick Moss, who is going to be talking to us today about his experience with AMN. So, Nick, why don't you just give us a little introduction about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so my name's Nick. I am a sort of holistic therapist. I've been in the industry for about 10 years, on and off. My background is personal training. After a previous career in the military, just transitioned into a personal training career. Pretty early on in that career, I got into rehabilitation and started to do some workshop with people like Paul Check and looking at the holistic side of things. And then that sort of led me on to study kinesiology and mind-body medicine and integrative medicine. And through that, became a lecturer with the college that I studied through, which was pretty cool. And since then, pretty early on, when I was studying kinesiology, I actually got a real interest into neurology. But I was looking out there and I couldn't really sort of find anything that was able to give me a practical view on how to put the understanding of the brain and neurology together until I saw the AMN stuff come out about a few years ago. So that was what got me into where I am right now.
Okay, so that's something that quite a few people say actually when it comes to our stuff, that it's the practical application side of it that it's quite rapidly applicable, and that's something that I tried to do. I've some background to you when I worked as a personal trainer for many years, and I learned a lot of stuff about neurology, but a lot of it I just couldn't really use with anyone. It was stuff that never really would come up, or I would never have a chance to really apply in any way. So when we put together the level 1 certification, that was the main thing. This is how to really do this stuff practically and quickly in a gym setting or in a clinic setting if you use movement. So that's cool. I'm glad you found us, and I'm glad you've gone through all of our education as you have. Have you got any particular cases you'd want to discuss with us that maybe would help students to going through the education to hear about, or maybe anyone who's thinking about taking the education to hear about what we could do?
Yeah, well, I mean, just before I even start with those cases, because I'm going to talk about some difficult ones, but I can say that pretty much every case that walks through the door, I can have an effect on. So, I've unwound people's 2-year neck pain within 5 minutes during neuroskeletal, but the ones I'm going to talk about are probably more extremely sort of complex medical cases. The first one I'll talk about, she's a 37-year-old female, and she had horrendous medical history, probably since birth, but then in her 20s has had about 10 to 15 surgeries on hips, knees, and everything else, and lots of neuralgic stuff going on, sciatica, trigeminal neuralgia, and just pretty banged up. And we started doing some work and getting some good results. And then something happened where one of her pins in her ischium from a previous surgery started to come loose. So what happened is went back to her surgeon who she'd been seeing for about 7 to 8 years. He did an emergency surgery, and in that surgery had accidentally partially severed the pudendal nerve. So that's the nerve that has a role in innervating the genitals. So it wasn't too awesome for the client, and she came back in, and it was around the time that you had started to release the Mastermind series, and it was EMS, the emotional motor system, and it was right into that pelvic neurology. So I was like, okay, sweet. Come back. We went through all those sort of swipes, went through the neuroskeletal stuff, even used some conscious and unconscious proprioception stuff. So I taught her how to actually use her eyes and visual pathways to create some sensation in that area. And within a few weeks, she was back on track. So that was pretty cool. Her surgeon even remarked on how quickly she recovered, which was good to hear. And also, but even since then, we've just kept going, kept on applying even the homeostasis stuff, pretty much everything in the AMN toolkit to her. And her gait, her posture, her well-being, general well-being is just completely different. So yeah, she's come full circle.
That's very cool. So what you're describing there, I put together a module called, as you said, the emotional motor system, which is something that's derived from the work of a guy called Gert Holstich. Um, and he kind of points out that the pelvic floor organs and the pelvic floor musculature to a very high degree is innervated by this other motor system, right? This emotional motor system, which is different to what people consider the only motor system, which of course is the volitional spinal tracts that are supposed to innervate all of the muscles. But there is this other guy, the emotional motor system, that's at play as well. So how much of a that's something that when I put it together, it was I put it together because I found it so interesting and thought it would be useful. And a lot of you guys have actually utilized it um, for pelvic issues. Did you find it was a big part of the equation in that particular case, or did you find you had to? You mentioned unconscious proprioception and conscious proprioception. I guess with the damage, you had to pull in quite a lot of your skill set, huh?
Yeah. It wasn't the main one, but it was definitely having learned a bit about the neurology was really helpful.
Right.
And I did apply the swipes to her and consistently have throughout the treatment process, but those EMS swipes. But yeah, it was the utilization of all the tools and some other tools that I had previously as well that I had to pull into this case.
Fantastic. And so, what about any other cases that you might have worked on? You'd want to share with us then?
Yeah, I got one other, and she's another difficult case. She's about 40 years old, and at about the age of 16, she had a motorcycle accident, and thinks that we've got some sort of crushed nerve coming out of the neck there, and it's created like a sort of where she gets up in her abduction or shoulder flexion. She can't really maintain it, couldn't maintain it, and also she would go into a elbow flexion. So straight off, she came to me in the gym. She had no idea I had this other skill set, and she started explaining it all, and it was blah blah blah. No one's been able to help me. I'm just going to deal with it. And I was like, okay, cool. I didn't even try and push it or anything like that. I just said, why don't we just do little bit of an assessment, and I'll just play with some drills. And this was mainly level one stuff, and it ended up being a VOR cancellation to the same side with her good hand, and some contralateral lower limb sort of knee mobility work, which helped get her arm up and stay up. And also the thing is that she had this chronic what she was calling phantom pain in the area where she couldn't really perceive, but it was there the whole time. So those drills within 1 to 2 days got rid of the pain straight away. So
Wow.
she came back a few weeks later and was just like, yeah, it's gone. I want to do some work with you. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's go. And it's been a pretty full on process. And as I've gone through the AMN material as well, it's very much, there's a lot of limbic stuff there, specifically around the accident and, her good side, which, cops a lot of the brunt. And we've gradually worked through, she's, her sleep's better, her well-being's better, her relationships are better. Going into abduction, it's much better. Going into flexion, still working on that, but we got somewhere the other day where we know we've got everything else working, but we just need to activate that tricep. And that's where we're at right now. So, and she's on board, and she's done things that she never ever thought could happen. So
Yeah, that's very cool. I've actually got a couple of questions for you now regards to some of the stuff you've said there. So with your background, you were in the military. I didn't know you were in the military, so we'll talk about that another time, I guess. But you mentioned you went through this like this holistic kind of healthcare education where you looked at lots of different kind of paradigms. Everyone who provides any sort of holistic based education in health and wellness is obviously trying to look at lots of different factors, and they're trying to educate the student. You have to consider lots of different things. And one of the things you mentioned there was mind body medicine, and it's a topic I do find interesting. And obviously with the stuff that I've put together, it's very it is kind of a very left brain approach. It's a very kind of sequential, physiological, but quite anatomically based process where you go through and you assess really the biology, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. We're going through, we're looking for increased electrical charges, which may be from the level of the brain, and also through different physiological systems. And we kind of, with that process, we're allowed to find out, we kind of build a pattern, don't you? You can build like a roadmap of a problem. And then we calibrate things. And the theory is that we reduce the charges in the biological system, and symptoms improve, ranges of motion improve, things generally get better. With the mind body medicine stuff that you mentioned, how much do you apply that, and how much of the mind body approach actually includes any body?
Quite a lot of it in the system that I learned. It was more, it's actually literally listening to the symptoms of the body to tell you what's happening in the mind, and vice versa.
Oh, wow.
So being able to like pick up even postures, archetypal postures. A person's whole health history will give you a clue into what types of psychological issues they're probably struggling with or trying to avoid or something like that. So I apply that all the time, and that's sort of like a pattern recognition thing that it helps with all this stuff. But what the AMN system has done, like you just said, it's given me that really precise way to look for where the dysfunction is.
Very cool. So
Which I didn't really always have before.
Sure. So it's kind of like, it's almost like a body mind approach, really. It's kind of the other way around. It's called mind body medicine, but it sounds like more of a body mind approach. The body gives you insight into the mind to a degree.
Definitely.
And
We
then,
utilize the acupuncture system a lot.
okay, great.
So the acupuncture theory, and use that system a lot. Just makes it quite easy to use. It's an old system.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's extremely ancient system, and we just actually put some information out recently on the groups talking about the premovascular system being the possible, the most likely physiological correlate, if it is that of the acupuncture meridian system. So that's actually really interesting as well. So it does fit with the whole.
I've seen that.
It's a fascinating bit of research, and it has been reproduced, and it's pretty interesting physiological stuff. So that's great how you
makes sense
together. We look at
Yep.
in the AMN stuff, we look at we consider these, we call them these limbic charges, which is based on work that's been out there for a very long time. It's controversial work, granted, but and it's another particular system, but from that system there's things that are called conflicts that can occur within the psyche, which are based on evolutionary archaic things that would have occurred to the animal species, to previous human beings, etc., throughout the period of time up until modern day, that ultimately get embedded into the psyche, and these things can get kind of triggered, and ultimately they can be directly correlated, it would appear, to dysfunction, sometimes disease, as is described in the actual source material that I'm describing here. And we utilize that quite extensively, don't we? That search for, is there a psyche element to a particular problem? Do you find it something that comes up a lot in the work that you're doing in pain complaints or in other things as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think pretty much every time I screen for it, it'd be very rare that it doesn't come up. The limbic stuff. I'd say every single complaint, even the most random thing that you wouldn't even think of, just a bung shoulder or a knee or something like that. If I screen for it, it generally will come up. So
yeah, it's something, that's the thing, isn't it? I think it's like, if you don't appreciate the entire organism, and if you don't really consider all of the things that could be at play in any particular given presentation, if you've learned to kind of specialize in one thing in this industry, be it a musculoskeletal approach or some kind of manual therapy approach, you really are leaving a huge amount of stuff on the table that could well be underlying a problem. And sometimes it can take a lot longer to get through a particular client presentation when you don't look at those things. So I think that's really, for me, as I was working a lot with clients full time, all the time, as you guys always are, that was the thing. If there was anyone I couldn't ever get any change in, I had to appreciate that I'm missing something here, and I needed a process which I could actually get, I could just check, because sometimes, granted, something is simple. It's just a shoulder problem at the shoulder. You've got a tight pec. you need to really, you need to relax that pec. But other times it can be far more far reaching in the system, much more convoluted. So what would you say to anyone who's interested in what we do, considering what we do? I mean, you've got a personal training background, you work on the gym floor still. I know that you do that. Do you in the clinic space as well, or are you just in the gym floor?
Yeah, well, I've got two clinic spaces I work out of, and one is now in the gym that I also work as a personal trainer at. So it works quite well with the AMN approach, because I think you can't have one without the other. I think these days you got to get those lasting results. You got to be able to give them the right corrective exercises, or therapeutic exercises, and coach them through those movements as they progress through the treatment. So I'm lucky that I have that at the gym I work at. It's awesome. So I can also do the stuff out on the floor, in a session, even, with, say, I've got a few athletes, or, call themselves athletes, and they want some, another quick story. I applied some of the coordination stuff to someone that wanted to improve their snatch, did all the coordination files, and they basically threw out the best snatch of their life, and it stayed. After doing lots of other musculoskeletal stuff, that was the main thing that sort of helped this person, another trainer at the gym.
That's very cool. And I think that's what you've just described is kind of the key here. Like when I'm a personal trainer, it's my background. I'm more of a holistic healthcare practitioner now, moving on with this integrated medicine stuff to, to build out how I work with people and kind of complexity of cases that I tend to take on now. But with that personal training background, it's really key to understand that this AMN approach, when you put it together with all of the stuff about movement and the ability to actually train a human body as well and coach them through movement, we've got quite a unique approach to actually being able to help people. Because obviously if you're just in the clinic room, there's not a lot of movement going on. You'll tend to get the person maybe past an ailment that they've got, and then you're not going to see them anymore. But with the ability to be on the gym floor, to actually be watching people move and learning all about how they actually coordinate themselves and where they need help in that regard, and working on their strength and their flexibility and all those things, as well as the more, let's say, therapeutic side, inverted commas, it does provide, I think, a really powerful approach to really helping people,
Absolutely.
through a long period of time. So it sounds like you're doing some amazing work. I'm hugely grateful for you going through the education, for being out there and helping people in the way that you do. So how can people in your area get in touch with you if they wanted to come and book a session with you?
Well, at the moment, I don't really have a website. I suppose I've got the profile on the AMN Practitioner directory.
Great.
You can just Google my name and you should, Nick Moss, sports kinesiologist or holistic therapist. It should come up with a few things online. Otherwise, they can email me at info@functionalkinesiology.com and see if we can have a chat and, offer you a hand.
Fantastic. Well, I hope some people seek you out, because once again, you are one of the best out there, and I really appreciate all of the work that you do and all the people that you've managed to help with your intent and with your knowledge. And it's a great thing. So please keep it up, and I will look forward to speaking with you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Cheers.